The Inn by TheMightyPay. Chapter 1. Lights. The day I changed was the day I quit trying to fit into a world that never really fit me. J.M. Storm. Great, now we're lost, Polly said sarcastically, chucking a rock into the wide, slow-moving river. No, we're not. We're just a little off the trail. Mr. Nelson looked around nervously at the dark wall of trees beside and behind them. Jason hoisted up a large rock and heaved it into the river, creating a far-reaching deluge, splattering them all with cold water. Jason, Polly yelled, stop it! That's not helpful. Now we're lost and wet. Hey, you were throwing rocks in too, Jason grumbled. That was a pebble. Hey, Poe, everyone should calm down, Lily intervened hurriedly. Mr. Nelson, what time is it? They all waited as Mr. Nelson took off his oversized round glasses, cleaned them carefully on his cuff, replaced them, and looked at his watch. 5:03. It's late. Look, the sun's going down. They all looked, and sure enough, the large red sun was sinking behind the trees, and the sky was filling with thick, dark clouds. Well, at least we're already wet, Lily said. Yeah, thanks to Jason, Polly muttered. Hey, guys! We're gonna die out here, Jason said. If we can't find our way back, we'll die of hypothermia and malnourishment if we don't get eaten by bears first. Mr. Nelson made a very undignified bleating sound. Jason, Lily said, not helping. I'm just saying. I was reading about grizzly bears the other day. They are extraordinarily intelligent and have an excellent sense of sight, smell, and hearing, and can run up to 35 miles per hour. Polly, Jason, and Lily had been sent on a camping trip, and, unfortunately, Mr. Nelson was the only adult at Mock's Orphanage for the Lonely who had been free. Apparently, the orphanage thought the fresh air would do them good, or maybe they just thought it was a good way to get rid of them. Mr. Nelson was not a good candidate for a camping trip instructor. He was always getting lost and forgetting where he put the ketchup. But there they were. They were lost, and it was going to rain. Polly sighed angrily. She was cold, wet, and Jason was seriously getting on her nerves. Jason, I swear, if you say one more dumb thing, I'll... Polly, stop it, Lily said, unintentionally irritatingly. Poe, not Polly, never Polly, Polly shouted. She was very particular about some things. Her mother, who she had an unhealthy relationship with, had named her Polly, and ever since she'd been brought to the orphanage, she'd insisted on being called Poe. Polly was a very particular person in many things, like clothes. She only wore black clothes, or sometimes white or gray. She couldn't stand wearing bright colors. Lily shrank back a bit under Polly's fierce gaze, and, sorry, she whispered. Lily was rather a meek person, a rule follower, and an optimist. She never yelled and never got angry, at least not that she showed. She always saw it on the bright side, like those annoying people that, when you accidentally cut off your finger, they say, well, at least it wasn't your whole hand. Or when you can't find your toothbrush, they say, well, at least the electricity's on. And when the lights go out 2 seconds later, they say, well, at least you don't have to worry about brushing your teeth. You can't see them anyway. Polly was not an optimist. She wasn't a pessimist exactly. She was more of a state the facts in a sarcastic manner sort of person. At that moment, it started to rain. Well, at least it's only sprinkling, Lily said. It began to pour. Well, at least, Lily, just don't, Jason said, wiping his wet brown hair out of his eyes. Look, Polly pointed, across the river. What are those? Fireflies, Mr. Nelson said excitedly. I didn't know they were in this part of the country. No, they're not, Jason said, looking at Mr. Nelson like he was an imbecile. They look more like magic floaty balls of light. Across the river, little soft yellow golden lights floated here and there. They didn't seem to be doing anything in particular. They were just floating, about a dozen of them, almost as if they were waiting. A little meadow or glade stretched behind them, bordered on both sides by more dark trees. What do you think they want? Lily asked. Let's go and see, Polly said, starting towards the bank. But how are we supposed to cross it? Jason said morosely. But Polly wasn't listening. She had begun to try and steady herself on one of the large black rocks that protruded from the river. She shuffled sideways, keeping her arms out and looking at her feet. When she was halfway across, she looked back, smirked, and asked, Coming? Or should I check it out first? Grumbling, Jason followed. "What if I fall in? I can't swim," Mr. Nelson said in a terrified voice. "You'll drown," Polly yelled across the river. She was already almost there. "It's okay, Mr. Nelson. I'll be right behind you," Lily said, always the comforter. Mr. Nelson eyed the river as though he thought it might bite him, although Polly strongly believed it was infested with piranhas. "Unless," Jason said from the middle of the river, "you want to wait here?" "For the bears?" Mr. Nelson shrieked in a high-pitched voice. Needless to say, he started very quickly after that. Once they were all safely on the opposite bank, the lights began zooming down the meadow so fast that they had to run to keep up. The meadow was slightly bowl-shaped, so after the decline of 20 feet, it began sloping upwards and towards a small grassy hill. Once they got within 10 yards, they saw that the hill was fitted with little doors, all around 4 feet high, but each vastly different. Firstly, they all had a small brass number, 5, 8, 23, 54, etc. And they didn't have any particular order. They were also all a different color, blue, green, yellow, etc., etc. Some were above others, with little porches and stairs, and each had a different style knocker, bell pull, or ringer. Some had little potted plants outside, or wind chimes. One door, with the number 5, had a black cat sitting on the stairs that watched them with yellow eyes. The lights drifted towards the closest door, which, instead of a number, bore the word office. An old-fashioned tavern sign hung above the office door, swinging a little in the rain. The green words painted on it read, "Mrs. Stick's Inn." 2 ceramic garden gnomes sat on either side of the door. One had a red cap, green jacket, a scruffy white beard, and held a fishing pole in his hands. He sat on a rock with a bucket that said, "Worms." The other was picking red and white mushrooms, the kind that always killed people in fairy tales. He wore a grubby brown jacket and a blue hat, and his gray beard went all the way to the ground. In one hand he held a basket, and in the other a large mushroom. He looked like he'd just picked it and was examining his specimen. At his feet were scattered more mushrooms, and hiding under one, a fat frog. It was raining very hard now, and they all were soaked. "Well, who wants to knock?" Polly asked. "Well, Mr. Nelson is the adult," Jason said. Well, you see, not it," Mr. Nelson spluttered. Not it. "Ugh, why is it always me?" Jason huffed. "I'm the youngest." Polly rolled her eyes. "You're not a baby. You're 12. Plus, you're also a boy." "Hey, fine." Jason walked up to the door and pulled on the bell pull. Chimes sounded from somewhere far away behind the door. They waited. After a moment, they could hear the sounds of tiny feet pitter-pattering down a long tunnel, a bolt being drawn back, and then the door opened, and a small, wavering voice asked, "Hello. Would you like a room?" End of chapter.